Am I the Ahole for not contacting my estranged family after my uncle's death? Honestly, I am sincerely seeking external viewpoints on this matter and will attempt to keep it relatively concise. About 1 week ago, I received the news of my uncle's passing. He is my father's younger brother. Neither my father, who I prefer to refer to as my genetic contributor, nor my paternal grandparents informed me. Instead, my mother received calls from friends who had heard the news. For context, my uncle was gay, and he and his husband were remarkable individuals who exemplified a relationship to which many aspire. Their love for one another was evident and profound. However, my father and grandparents did not accept this lifestyle. My uncle's husband, whom we shall refer to as Brad, was not permitted to attend family gatherings, and their marriage went unacknowledged. It was only in recent years that Brad was slowly allowed to partake in family events, although their true partnership remained overlooked. To clarify, they had been together for over 30 years, and one would think that such a long duration would have led to acceptance, but I digress. Approximately 5 years ago, my brother became involved with a woman we can name Karen, who cannot even be adequately described as vile. Her behavior towards my niece was atrocious, which should have been sufficient reason for me to disapprove of her. There is more to that story for another time. It seems my brother has inherited too much of our father's traits. He severed ties with me and our mother's side of the family because we expressed concern about the mistreatment my niece was experiencing. About 1 or 2 years after he cut us off, our father's family also banned Karen from their homes, prompting my brother to distance himself from them as well. I had to share that background to explain how my brother's issues led to my father's side cutting me off. They disregarded my perspective for the one instance in which I did not defend my brother and attempted to explain what Karen was doing to my niece. I pointed out that she was manipulative and aimed to isolate my brother from his family. Unfortunately, this resulted in my being yelled at, and at this stage in my life, I have grown too old for such nonsense. My father's family has consistently shown that if I do not conform to their expectations, I am deemed inconsequential to them. This pattern inevitably led to me apologizing and behaving as someone I am not in order to please them. I had reached my limit, and my mental health improved significantly without needing to tread lightly and put on a facade. Regrettably, the people I ceased communication with included my uncle. I bear a heavy burden of regret, particularly because he endured similar abuse. He did not stand up for me, not out of a lack of love or belief that they were justified, but because he had also suffered their mistreatment and had not learned to advocate for himself, given how their relationship with Brad was treated. I wish this realization had come sooner, but now it is too late. I would give anything to speak with him and express my understanding that it was not his fault he did not defend me. He had to fight every day for his relationship with Brad while trying to please his parents by concealing that connection. This devastating revelation has led me to consider whether I should reach out to my grandparents and/or father, perhaps sending a card at the very least. My hesitation stems from the fear of subjecting my mental health to the turmoil I once faced and questioning whether attempting to mend those relationships would outweigh the peace I have achieved in recent years. I find myself grappling with this dilemma. I cannot fathom their pain, as losing a child or brother is profoundly different from losing an uncle. However, my anger persists. How could they not inform me, not reach out while my uncle was still alive on a ventilator, and take away the only opportunity I had to convey what I needed to say? I am certain I will receive criticism in the comments for being selfish, but I urge you not to judge without understanding the extensive abuse I have endured. My stepmother would come to my brother and me, recounting how our father had abused her and suggesting that he likely abused our mother as well. He did, and he was physically abusive towards me as well. Both my stepmother and father attempted to isolate us by suggesting that misunderstandings had occurred. My stepmother also prohibited either my brother or me from speaking with our father unless she was present, even during phone calls. My father would avoid hugging me in public for fear it might reach my stepmother. When one of their pets passed away, my father would insist that I did not need to know, even though he was aware that I struggle to cope with the loss of animals, which is my emotional weak spot. He did this knowing how it affected me, driven by cruelty, and I suspect my lack of notification about my uncle's death stemmed from the same cruelty. It is all deeply troubling, and it is clear that this side of the family is severely dysfunctional. I wanted no part of it anymore, and I was committed to breaking the cycle. My relationship with my grandparents was mostly positive during my childhood, but it deteriorated as I grew older. Despite being the only one out of 4 grandchildren to regularly call and visit them, I was never deemed good enough to fit into their ideal family. However, I do have increased empathy for them since they lost their child. I had resolved to send cards to my grandparents and father, but I spoke with Brad today. He helped me understand how deeply my uncle loved me, and that he bore no grudges against me for not maintaining contact with him or that side of the family. I always appreciated why my uncle loved Brad. He is genuinely a wonderful person with whom I look forward to continuing a relationship and helping preserve my uncle's memory. During our conversation, he informed me that neither I nor my brother were mentioned in the obituary, and that it was our father's decision. He let me know that his initial draft included us, but he had to respect my father as his brother-in-law. My heart shattered at this revelation. As I processed the loss of my uncle, particularly in such unexpected circumstances, I find myself reflecting on life's brevity and the unpredictability of our last interactions with others. It is the reason I decided to at least send cards, so that even if I choose not to rekindle those relationships, they would still know I cared, and that sentiment would remain unchanged. One does not have to like someone to love them. Yet, the sheer audacity to omit me and my brother from my uncle's obituary is shocking. It is not what my uncle would have wanted, and the only people this omission harms are me and my brother. I know my grandparents approved it before publication. Now that you have context regarding the estrangement, am I the antagonist if I choose to take no action, send no card, extend no sympathies, and do nothing at all? To those who may wish to be unkind, please take a moment to consider refraining. I do not seek that negativity on the internet. Story 2. Boys suck even when you're related to them. Aita. My brother, who is currently 34, and I, who am presently 30, have always shared a close bond, so much so that we were often mistaken for twins during our childhood and teenage years. When I graduated from high school, he welcomed his first daughter into the world. My mother and I relocated out of state when I turned 21, and within that same year, he had his second daughter. I believe these details are significant. From that moment on, the dynamics shifted, and while I recognize that our lives took divergent paths, me being free and uncommitted, while he was tied down, I felt the change acutely. I moved out on my own, starting a new chapter, and during that period, I was the one making an effort to communicate and maintain our relationship. Eventually, I reached a point where I no longer wanted to invest energy into a relationship that was not reciprocated. About 3 months after I began living independently, my brother called me and asked if I would consider moving back to his state since he needed a roommate. Although I felt guilty, I had to decline his request, explaining that I was focused on my own journey. He did not take my refusal well and subsequently stopped engaging with me or responding to my messages. I chalked it up to him being preoccupied with his own life. While I was hurt, I managed to accept the situation. Then the COVID pandemic struck, leading me to reassess my living situation. I reached out to my brother to see if I could stay with him, and he kindly agreed, stating that it would work since he and his housemate were planning to renew their lease. Upon moving in, I quickly discovered that he was living with a 19-year-old girl named Dee. This revelation turned everything upside down. Had I known he was involved with someone, I would have reconsidered moving in. To provide some context, my brother, at 29, had been dating a woman named S, who had 2 children and was living with him until Dee entered the picture and essentially urged S to leave out of jealousy, wanting an exclusive relationship with my brother. I learned all of this on the very day I arrived. When I first met Dee, I was unaware of her age. However, when I privately inquired, my brother informed me that she was only 19. I was extremely uncomfortable with this, especially since we had previously discussed how inappropriate it would be for him to date someone younger than me. During my stay, I found myself practically couch surfing since they had already signed the lease prior to my arrival, and his other housemate reneged on his promise to move. The entire situation was untenable. Whenever I tried to spend time with my brother, she was always around. If I attempted to cook a comforting meal, she would express her distaste for garlic, or both would claim they were not hungry and go out instead. Each time I tried to engage with her, she would retreat to their room, where their loud intimacy would often ensue. It was evident she was marking her territory, and I simply did not like her energy from the beginning. She came across as possessive and manipulative. To add to that, both of them were engaging in heavily psychedelic experiences together, which I felt altered their perceptions. While I enjoy marijuana regularly, I view psychedelics as reliant on set and setting, and I believe that when two people are consistently using drugs together, they can fall into a concerning rhythm. After 3 months of discomfort, I decided to return to my mother's place, several states away. Come summer 2021, my brother visited my mom and me, feeling down because he had cheated on Dee and they had separated. I naively agreed to move in with him again on the condition that he would cut ties with her and honestly communicate if he did not. He agreed, and I traveled there, only to have him sneak her into the house during my first week. When he left for work in the morning, she would sleep in and leave the house, slamming the door forcefully behind her. The first time I heard it, I thought someone was breaking in and called the police, texting my brother for clarification only to discover it was her. At that point, I was fed up, and after 3 weeks, I moved out. He ended up marrying her on February 22, 2022, without informing either my mother or me. We learned of this elopement through Facebook and subsequently received a call from him stating it was just the two of them. My mother and I later traveled to attend his wedding celebration in the summer of 2022, only to find out from his mother-in-law that she had witnessed the elopement and assumed we were aware of it. Based on the expressions on my brother's and Dee's faces, I realized we were not meant to find out. During the wedding photo session, I was sent upstairs to care for my sick niece and excluded from the pictures. Since that moment, I have distanced myself from him, attempting to maintain civility for my mother's sake. This past year, 2024, I have become more receptive to the idea of having a sister-in-law. My mother and I are moving closer to him, and when we informed him, he was delighted. One day, he called to ask if he could stay over if necessary, and I readily agreed, establishing an open-door policy for him. Since then, he has been more amiable and has begun to express that he recognizes Dee as an alcoholic who may have borderline personality disorder and refuses to seek help. He is now separated from her and is contemplating a divorce. I support whatever decision he makes, but his behavior is quite puzzling. When they first separated, my mother and I thought it would be temporary because he stated he would be willing to try again if she sought help. He also mentioned he would be celibate and expected the same from her. However, 4 months later, he informed us that she had cheated on him after discovering he rented a hotel room to meet another woman. Now that you're up to speed, I lost my temper and confronted him about everything. My mom believes I am being too harsh and should approach him with more kindness as he navigates this challenging period. I find this frustrating. It feels like he receives a pass for his actions simply because he is male. I am both disgusted and disappointed by his lack of accountability, and even though I have never liked Dee, I do not think she deserves to be treated this way. I have consistently reminded him about her age when he makes derogatory comments regarding her not being the stable partner he married, pointing out that she is 10 years younger. He often responds with annoyance to this truth. I am just feeling irritated and frustrated about the fact that I have once more agreed to live with him despite his ongoing poor decision-making. I have resolved to stay for the duration of the lease, but if matters do not improve, I am seriously considering buying a van and returning to my adventurous lifestyle. I needed to express my feelings, and writing has helped me realize how frustrating it can be to deal with men, even those related to you. I know I may come off as dramatic for giving this another shot, but am I in the wrong for calling him out on his behavior? I apologize for the length and disorganization of this message. Story 3. My M21 boyfriend's M20 family won't let me go to his funeral. How can I honor his memory? As I compose this, I find myself at a loss for words. My former boyfriend, aged 20, was my aged 21 first love. Only a few months after I came to terms with my sexuality did we begin our relationship through a dating application. We have been together since January 2024. He opened my eyes to an entirely new perspective. He possessed remarkable intelligence and breathtaking beauty. With his lovely brown hair and mesmerizing hazel eyes, he had the face of an angel and a voice that was soothing like honey. He was incredibly captivating. Though he came from a working-class, homophobic, and deeply religious family, he never allowed that to deter him. He had experienced near-fatal incidents, authored books, performed in bands, and learned to play multiple instruments all on his own. Additionally, he had an endearing hobby of collecting pond water from a local lake and meticulously recording the various organisms present within it each month. He cherished sharing this closed ecosystem project with me. He made me feel like I was everything. He consistently encouraged me to reconcile with my family, pursue my interests, and continue my therapy sessions. Each night when we were together, he would wrap his arms around me like a protective spoon and express how fortunate he felt to hold me. Before meeting him, I harbored significant uncertainty about my sexuality. I had been intimate with 8 women before him and felt nothing. Discovering someone with whom I had intense sexual attraction and eventually fell in love was a whole new realm of human experience I never thought I would encounter. For my 3rd year of university, prior to meeting him, I had made plans to study abroad in America. We are both from Britain. Although I still strongly desired to go, I worried about the impact it would have on our relationship since we had only been together for a year. Fear and guilt consumed me, as I felt selfish for wanting to embark on this journey despite my love for him. He admitted that he, too, was reluctant to see me leave, but urged me to prioritize my own needs. He imparted wisdom he had gleaned from his homophobic upbringing. Sometimes, one must prioritize themselves, even in the face of profound love, much like how he embraced his sexual orientation openly despite his family's views, and how I should seize this opportunity while I could. My admiration for him deepened, knowing that his love for me was so immense that he would place my happiness higher than his own desires. The long-distance aspect of our relationship was manageable. Every 3 to 4 months, I would travel back to Scotland, or he would come to Texas, and everything would feel normal once again. A week after New Year's Day, he visited me for our 1st anniversary, and it felt just like any ordinary day, loving and intimate. After a week together, he left, and just last week, I received a devastating text. It was from his closest friend. My dear boyfriend had been struck by a drunk driver and was declared dead at the scene. It felt surreal. I had literally texted him earlier that same day. A song was on his Instagram notes. In his time zone, it was still early evening. Why was there already a drunk driver on the road? I am consumed with guilt. Had I known that those would be his last 6 months on Earth, I would have never spent them apart from him. My enjoyment of Texas has been minimal. It pales in comparison to the time lost with him, and I certainly did not anticipate losing my last months with someone who was as close to an angel as one could hope to encounter. I have made new friends here, but they are not the ones I have known for years. They struggle to find words of comfort, as what can one genuinely say? All I want is to return home. His parents had not contacted me, so I reached out to them earlier today to inquire about funeral arrangements. I expressed my deepest sympathies and asked for information regarding the memorial. I had never met his parents before and obtained their contact information from my boyfriend's friends. Their response was simply, "With all due respect, we would prefer that you do not attend our son's funeral. It will be a religious ceremony, and we desire the most respectful farewell for our son possible. I hope you understand. Best wishes." I suspect they have blocked my number, as all my subsequent messages have failed to be delivered, let alone read. I am at a loss for what to do. I cannot bear the thought of missing my boyfriend's funeral, but I also cannot impose upon their private mourning. That would be disrespectful to his memory. As I remain here in America, listening to the song that he had on his Instagram notes the day he passed, I know it's over by the Smiths, a track we shared on our first date. I feel utterly hopeless. The world seems devoid of color. I have no one I love here, and the man I cherished the most is gone. I cannot even pay homage to his memory. I feel completely lost. So that is why I am here venting. I apologize if this comes across as depressing. I needed to express these feelings. Edit. I wish to share something about how profoundly remarkable my beloved was that I just remembered. He transcended societal norms. He once told me, just a few weeks ago before his passing, about a moment when he was 8 years old and cried uncontrollably over a mug. I laughed and asked why, and he explained that, at the age of 8, he felt deep sorrow that inanimate objects in the universe could not experience life or sensation as humans, animals, and plants do, simply because they were not fortunate enough to possess consciousness. His love for life was immense, and he had so much empathy that he even felt compassion for inanimate objects. He had a near-death experience at 5, which he claimed made him realize that Evan, a pseudonym, was merely an identity that would eventually perish along with his physical form, memories, and personality. He believed in a universal whole to which all the energy and atoms that constituted him would ultimately return. This thought brings me comfort, believing he is now part of everything, even a mundane mug that I might drink from without a second thought. He often discussed the idea of the non-self, akin to a Buddhist philosophy, yet he was perhaps the most genuinely human individual I have ever encountered, a wellspring of empathy and love. I miss him dearly. In summary, my boyfriend tragically died in an unexpected accident a week ago, and his family does not wish for me to attend his funeral due to their overly religious and homophobic beliefs.